Hi, I'm Karen Moniz, Technical Director at ICCBA. Welcome to today's webinar, Encoded Accurately, ISBT 128 Data Exchange Essentials. The goal of today's webinar is to share information on how to accurately encode information about medical products of human origin using the ISBT 128 standard. This needs to be accurate so that anyone who uses the standard within your healthcare ecosystem will be able to accept and process the encoded information. We can all visually read labels, right? But we need to be able to process the encoded information. I am joined today by Robin Wilkinson, ICCBA's Deputy Technical Director, who will describe the nuts and bolts of data elements versus data structures, linear barcodes, and 2D data matrix symbols. We also have two non-ICCBA speakers today. Graham Murdoch will be explaining the use of RFID for medical products of human origin, and David Barwin will provide information on how to electronically exchange this information. We'll all be around for a question and answer session at the end of the webinar. Please submit your questions via the Q&A tab. You can access that by clicking on the live stage symbol and then going to the Q&A tab. Please make sure you enter your questions there and not in the chat tab. Brian Reese, an ICCBA Information Standards Specialist, will be moderating the Q&A session. And first up is Robin Wilkinson.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming to our webinar. My portion of the talks today will cover linear barcodes and 2D symbology on the labels. So let's start with those labels. What's on an ISBT 128 label? We've got several different MPHO, medical products of human origin, labels here. We've got one for blood, human milk, cellular therapy, and tissue products. They all contain eye-readable text, which corresponds to electronically readable encoded data for traceability, such as the donation identification number and the product code, as well as other required or optional data, depending on the type of MPHO. The electronically readable data is encoded using data structures, which can be made up of multiple data elements, one or more data elements. So let's break down the difference between data elements and data structures. Data elements specify meaning and purpose within a larger system or data set, while data structures specify context and structure of a data set. Data elements are basic, indivisible, discrete pieces of information, while data structures may contain more than one element. So here's an example data structure. It is a product code. This happens to be a tissue product code. And it's made up of two elements. The first element is the product description code. It's a 5-character code. And then for tissue, the 3-character division identifier. Also, you'll see that the product code data structure, all data structures, include a data identifier. Data identifiers are 2 or 3 character sets of characters set aside by ANSI, the American National Standards Institute, to distinguish ISBT 128 data from other types of data. The product code data structure data identifier here is an equal sign and a less than sign. All ISBT 128 data structures will begin with either an equal sign or an ampersand, followed by a second or third character. The specific characters that make up the data identifier helps the IT system determine which piece of data is being scanned. And more information on this can be found in the technical specification ST001. Okay, so data elements. Data elements, again, make up data structures. For a list of data elements, please refer to reference table 42 or RT042 on the ICCBA website. ICCBA also provides a dictionary of data elements, that's ST027, which currently covers the main data elements and will eventually be expanded to include all active data elements in reference table 42. Okay, for data structures, we want you to again look at ST001, the ISBT 128 standard technical specification. That is our core document. And in section 2, it's going to list all of the data structures. And I should note that the table of contents in ST001 is a great place to start when learning about the breadth, depth, and scope of the ISBT 128 standard. Okay, we're going to go into linear barcodes now. Okay, ISBT 128 uses code 128 for linear barcodes because it is a high density linear barcode symbology, which can encode all 128 ASCII characters. It can encode upper and lowercase letters, numbers, punctuation, and special characters. And it is widely used in logistics, healthcare, and other industries. The ICCBBA core document, ISBT 128 Standard Technical Specification, ST001, dictates the print quality of your labels. And I'm not going to read all of these out here, but basically you're going to want to make sure that your labels, your inks and your label materials meet these this quality. Nobody wants fuzzy labels or smeared labels, right? So you're going to want to validate your labels. Okay, now we're going to talk about the barcode dimensions that are described in ST001. The X dimension is the narrowest width of the narrowest line within the barcode. Also, it defines the quiet zones. The quiet zones are essential for reading the barcode. You're going to want to have no text at the beginning and no text or images at the end, and also no text touching the barcodes from the top or the bottom. And the height is at least 15 millimeters or 15% of the length, whichever is greater. And that height is going to be really important for concatenation. Concatenation is when two barcodes are meant to be read together. The ST001 also talks about the gap between the last barcode and the last character of the first barcode and the start character of the second barcode. And both barcodes must be oriented in the same manner. So you can have some a little bit askew, but it has to be able to be read in one laser scan. So you're going to want to be careful and train your employees that the DIN sticker that goes on there really needs to be set so that it'll end up being parallel, so that when you do a scan, the laser scan goes through the whole, both of the barcodes that are meant to be concatenated. Okay, and then there's the image of the straight line scan. And then finally, there should be no vertical bars between either barcode. And the stop codes should be on the same side for each barcode. So if you're getting DIN pads that have the very tall DIN barcode and then the DIN printed above and below, and then you split that in half, when you flip over that top part, it's going to break the concatenation process for other facilities because now you've flipped the start and the stop codes. Okay, so we've reduced the scan with the number of scans with concatenation down from 6 to 4. But what if we reduced it all the way down to 1 scan? And that's what we can do with 2D symbology. This is a transitional label. It's got both linear barcodes and the 2D symbol. This can be used before we get to implementing this label, which is the 2D barcode only label. But right now, a lot of facilities do not have the image reader that is required to read a 2D barcode. A lot of facilities still have the straight line scan scanners, and it's expensive to replace all of those scanners everywhere. So right now, you can use the 2D transitional label until everybody switches over to the more efficient 1 2D symbol. Okay. 2D symbols are also useful on smaller labels. You can see we've got a little milk label and a cellular therapy vial label. And I want to note that the 2D symbol is not a QR code. It is a data matrix 2D symbol. So what's the difference? Well, the 2D data matrix has L-shaped finder pattern, whereas the QR code has 3 box-shaped finder patterns. And also, data matrix is generally used for asset tracking and product identification, whereas QR codes are generally for marketing, website links, and mobile payments. And here we've got two examples. One is the data matrix on the left-hand side. It's the compound message, that is data structure 023. And on the right-hand side, we've got a handy QR code so that you can subscribe to ICCBA's newsletter. Okay, so we're going to dive a little deeper into the compound messages. Okay, this string of text is what is encoded in this 2D data matrix. It includes the DIN, the blood type, the product code, the expiration date, and special testing for red cell antigens. You'll note that at the beginning, it's got this compound message data structure. That's going to tell you how much data is going to be provided after that initial compound message. It's got a data identifier, which is equal sign plus and plus sign. And then the data structure, the 05 indicates that there are 5 data elements, ISBT 128 data elements that are going to follow that compound message. And then the 020 indicates that it's going to be, the data is going to be strung together in a specific order. And that is dictated by a reference table that can be found on the ICCBA website. You'll notice too that each data structure begins with its own data identifier. That is so that if it was not defined, if the order was not defined by that 020 code, the IT system could actually interpret all of that data because the data identifiers identify which data is being scanned. And then we also want to talk a little bit about the red cell antigens. This string of code is way too long to be printed in a barcode. And you can see the breakdown here of red cell antigens. And I'm coming to a close here. As you can see, the data matrix encodes much more data than a linear barcode and offers just one scan instead of multiple scans. And this is true not only for blood, but for any MPHO. I believe we have Graham coming up next.
Hello, my name is Graham Murdoch. I am Managing Director of Sato Vicinity, a company specializing in RFID research and development. I've been working in RFID for 40 years and hold more than 35 patents in RFID and wireless powering. I'm a co-author of the RFID Air Interface Standard ISO IEC 18000-3, which is recommended by the International Society of Blood Transfusion guidelines for the use of RFID in transfusion medicine. I'm a member of the ISBT Working Party on Information Technology, where I'm contributing to the update of the RFID guidelines, and also a member of the ISBT Working Party on Blood Supply Management, which is leading a trial focused on remote site blood management using RFID technology. In 2006, the ISBT Working Party on Information Technology established the RFID Task Force to review the current state of RFID and develop guidelines for their use of RFID in transfusion medicine. 4 years later, the guidelines for the use of RFID in transfusion medicine were published in Vox Sanguinis. The guidelines recommend the use of passive HF technology at 13.56 megahertz for transfusion medicine when applied to blood bags and storage containers. With ISO IEC 18000-3 as the recommended tag standard and data encoding rules in support of the ISBT 128 standard technical specification. I'll explain what passive HF is, why it was chosen, and what is happening now with it. I'll finish off with some notes on implementation and considerations and observations about RFID. Before we proceed, a basic familiarity with the elements of an RFID system and the terminology used to describe these would be useful. So radio frequency identification is a method of uniquely identifying items that uses electromagnetic radio waves to interact and exchange data between tags and readers. There are defined standards to ensure the interoperability of all components. Readers have an antenna that sends and receives electromagnetic waves to exchange data with the tag. There are many types of reader designs and functionalities that are optimized for use as handheld readers, stationary readers, reader gates, tunnels, and equipment integrated readers. Shown here are some examples of readers, antennas, and a selection of tags. So let's start with what the term passive means. This means that the tags have no internal power source, such as a battery, and derive their power solely from the reader's interrogation field. Now, what is HF and why was it chosen from all of the available RFID frequencies? To understand this, we need to understand a little bit about basic physics and of the three frequencies used in RFID. These frequencies are low frequency, or LF, at about 135 kilohertz, high frequency HF at 13.56 megahertz, and ultra high frequency UHF in the 868 to 956 megahertz band. The physics associated with the different frequencies results in very different physical characteristics. The key difference is that the LF and HF systems operate in the near field, whereas UHF systems operate in the far field. So what does this mean? Well, the equations on the left describe the electric and magnetic fields around a small antenna element. The key thing to note is that there are terms that vary according to the inverse cube, the inverse square, and the direct inverse of distance from the antenna. The important elements are the inverse square and the direct inverse of distance, which have been circled in blue and pink. The inverse square term is the near field term and is very strong close to the antenna but diminishes rapidly with distance, whereas the direct inverse is the far field and is weak near the antenna but diminishes much more slowly with distance. There is a crossover point where they have equal magnitude, which is at a distance of the wavelength divided by 2 pi. That is, the transition between near field and far field is wavelength dependent. This transition between near and far fields is shown for the three frequencies. The LF and HF systems operate at less than half a meter, which is well within the near field, whereas UHF operates beyond 52 millimeters, which is clearly in the far field. We can now turn our attention to the different physical characteristics of the near and far fields. The LF and HF systems operating in the near field, where the magnetic field dominates and the reader and tag antennas are coils. There is reciprocal coupling between antenna coils through the magnetic field. That is, the coupling from the reader to the tag is identical to the coupling from the tag back to the reader. The magnetic field is only able to operate at short distances. However, the reciprocal coupling can provide 100% reliable communication. UHF systems operate in the far field using a radiating electromagnetic wave which decouples from the reader antenna. This provides much longer range operation. However, the transmitted wave is decoupled and there is no guarantee of reliable reply communication. For transfusion medicine, blood bags, where the blood bags may be located on a mixer or on the shelf of a fridge, the communication distance is very short. And long-range communication could be problematic, allowing tags to be inadvertently or even surreptitiously scanned from a great distance. Also, water, ice, and biological materials are essentially transparent to the magnetic fields of near-field systems. These materials have almost no effect on the RFID signals and do not absorb them. In contrast, the radiating electromagnetic wave of a far-field system interacts strongly with polar molecules and is absorbed by water, ice, and other biological materials. To give you an idea of the problems with absorption of the RFID signals by ice, shown here is a freezer packed with frozen plasma. The shelves are 0.6 of a meter deep, which is quite common. So to read and identify plasma units requires the RFID signal to pass through a significant thickness of ice. Despite their excellent performance around ice and biologicals, LF systems were eliminated on both cost and physical suitability grounds. The antenna coils used in LF tags have to be made of wire, typically 100 or more turns, and are both physically solid and not suitable for integration into a blood label or for direct printing. This is unlike HF and UHF tags, which can be made from foil sheets materials and incorporated into printable paper labels. The guidelines identified safety as one of the reasons for choosing high frequency at 13.56 megahertz. The US Food and Drug Administration requested that blood products were subjected to radio energy under a worst case scenario to determine whether there was any adverse in vitro impact. The study concluded that exposure to intense HF energy for extended periods had no adverse effects on in vitro cellular integrity of red cells or pooled platelets. On the basis of these results, the FDA has granted permission to proceed with the use of HF RFID for transfusible blood products. Basically, HF radio energy was shown to be safe and not absorbed nor interact significantly with water, ice, biological, or living systems. Furthermore, the HF reader field can be designed to minimize radio emissions, to minimize interference with other medical devices. HF is also an internationally recognized frequency with globally uniform operational parameters maintained by the International Telecommunications Union, the ITU, and the International Standards Organization, that is ISO, and may be used worldwide on an unlicensed and unrestricted basis. It is supported with the global RFID standard ISO IEC 18000-3, which is a proven mature technology standard with extensive supporting standards. ISO 18000-3 is the international standard that defines the air interface communication parameters for passive RFID systems operating at 13.56 megahertz. It defines two modes suitable for transfusion, mode 1 and mode 2. These modes are not interoperable, but they are expected to operate without causing any significant interference with each other. Mode 1 is a rebadged version of the legacy ISO IEC 15693 standard developed in the 90s for individual card applications such as access control and public transport. Mode 2 is a new RFID technology based on phase jitter modulation with the acronym PJM, was designed for high-speed bulk applications where items are closely stacked and or densely packed in random orientations. There are other characteristics of passive HF that support a global deployment in blood banks and hospitals. Stacking or dense packing of tagged items is required. This capability was available at HF with Mode 2 HF. Due to its near-field operation, HF has a well-defined operating volume inside which very reliable operation occurs and outside which spurious operation is not possible. HF has high performance with some of the highest data rates available for RFID communication. It also had lower tag costs and the lowest cost reader hardware of the frequency options suitable for transfusion. The HF tags were widely available, the readers were widely available, and there were many customer item level deployments of the technology. So what happened? I'll take a short detour to explain the what and why of what happened after 2010 until quite recently. After 2010, there was high enthusiasm for RFID technology, and many POC trials were conducted. However, there was no significant adoption of RFID in transfusion until recently. The principal reason was that the RFID technology of 2010 was not designed for transfusion. The readers consisted of handheld readers, which are little better than using a barcode scanner, or gate or portal readers, which are only able to read a tag or a few tags at most, and are not able to reliably read data from bulk or packed items. So what is happening now? Recently, there have been significant advances in the available RFID technology designed specifically for transfusion medicine, suitable for the complete vein-to-vein tracking from donation to transfusion. I'll show some examples of these in this and the next few slides. There are RFID labels integrated as primary and secondary blood labels, supported by on-demand RFID-enabled printers for donation and for release label printing. There are automatic sample tube labelers applying RFID sample tube labels and readers for sample tube programming at donation. There are desktop readers with compatible surfaces for blood bags and sample tubes. There are tunnel readers for bulk dispatch from blood processing centers and receipt into hospitals with supporting temperature loggers for automatic uploading of the transport cold chain information. There are now RFID blood labels with additional NFC capability for use at bedside transfusion, allowing standard smart devices to be used at the point of transfusion. There are also RFID readers now integrated into storage appliances. We can see examples here of fridges, freezers, and agitators, all fitted with ISO IC 18000-3 RFID systems. One method shown replaces the fridge or freezer shelves with identically sized RFID shelves to maintain the temperature profile and storage capacity of the fridge. Another method shown uses storage drawers to allow easy access to individual blood bags. There are also RFID shelving systems for both cold and freezer rooms. Here are examples from a large blood processing center where RBC and frozen plasma are stored on active RFID shelving, which provides real-time location tracking of all products in storage. There are also methods of fitting RFID to existing ultra-low temperature freezers for storage of medical products of human origin. Most recently, the problems with remote site blood management have resulted in products designed specifically for tracking a small number of units held at remote sites. Here is shown an RFID antenna designed to be placed on the shelf of a fridge with connection to its supporting reader by the cable passing through the temperature probe port of the fridge. The ISBT Working Party on Blood Supply Management will be conducting a trial of these in various countries across the world. Recently, the significant advances in the available RFID technology designed specifically for transfusion medicine have resulted in the Working Party deciding to update the 2010 RFID guidelines in line with these advances in RFID technology that are pertinent to transfusion medicine. The guideline update will build on the prior version and focus on the changes since the 2010 publication. The update is written for all those who are interested in using RFID in transfusion medicine, including backed products, autologous blood donation and cell salvage, cellular therapy products, tissues, organs, and other medical products of human origin. I'll make some remarks on the implementation, followed by some general considerations and observations about RFID in transfusion medicine. Shown here are the various hardware elements and data flows in an RFID transfusion system. A key component is the RFID middleware located between the RFID system and the existing blood management system, or LIS. Close collaboration with your existing software vendor and the middleware provider, if they are different, is essential. A four-phased approach to implementation is recommended by the guidelines. The process starts with an assessment phase to assess the technical feasibility and impact of using RFID. The project team should conduct research from both a workflow and a process-oriented perspective, as well as a technological systems perspective. There is a prototype phase where the objective is to demonstrate the functionality and test the limits of the RFID system in a realistic yet safe and secure environment that emulates the targeted processes. There is a pilot phase, which provides real processes in limited sites with basic integration to back-end production systems. The pilot phase is methodologically similar to the prototype phase. However, the pilot phase has an expanded scope in terms of processes and back-end integration. Finally, there is the deployment phase, which involves full-scale deployment of the systems and processes. This phase requires rigorous methods for operating and managing the system during and after deployment. When considering the RFID implementation, consideration of the following factors may be useful in identifying and addressing key issues of cost and utility. Can the RFID system be utilized through the complete end-to-end of the blood supply chain? And if not, how will this affect the utility of the system? Is the RFID system suitable for all blood and transfusion products, including batch products? If not, are dual or multiple systems feasible? Is it possible for the RFID system to be fitted to the existing installed base of storage appliances, or are new appliances required? Is there any loss of storage capacity, and will this necessitate additional storage appliances? Is there available floor space for the footprint of additional storage devices? What is the reading speed of the system under worst case conditions, and is this adequate? Does the tag provide sufficient memory capacity that is capable of operating at all temperature extremes? The guidelines recommend that the complete ISBT 128 dataset be written to the tag's memory. This requires at least 2 kbits of programmable memory on the tag, and if tagging products are to be stored at ultra-low temperatures, then full tag functionality is required down to below -86 degrees centigrade. What changes in handling procedures are required, and if special handling procedures are required, what will be the impact of their impact on the operations and staff? Can the RFID hardware and labels be sourced from a single vendor, or is coordination amongst multiple vendors required? Is a suitable vendor or vendors all for local servicing and support available? Does the RFID system integrate to the existing blood management system, or LIS? And finally, is there suitable middleware available if it does not integrate directly to the existing blood management system or LIS? Finally, I'll close with some general observations about RFID. RFID adds another layer of safety to the safeguard of current labeling systems and electronic blood management systems. RFID labels allow remote, non-contact, accurate data entry and real-time tracking with product location. RFID integrated storage equipment, such as RFID fitted freezers and fridges, agitators, incubators, cold room shelving, and freezer room shelving, can provide real-time visibility with unattended and automated stock taking and location tracking. Real-time temperature logs of all stored products can be automatically generated, ensuring a record of cold chain compliance for all stored products. RFID increases the accuracy of tracking time and temperature and reduces product wastage, thus increasing the quality and availability of blood products for patients. It can ensure the appropriate transfusion of the right blood to the right patient, thus reducing errors at the bedside and increasing patient safety. Thank you. I'll now pass to David Barwin from StemSoft Software.
Thank you, Graham. Good morning, everyone. Today I will be walking you through some ISBT 128 data exchange topics, specifically how XML and HL7 FHIR are both compatible with and can help augment ISBT 128. A little bit about my background. I've spent the last 14 years building software products with StemSoft Software, and in doing so have built deep expertise in labeling and interoperability requirements for cellular therapies and medical products of human origin. We build informatics systems, batch process records, outcome management systems that support standard of care cell therapy and advanced manufacturing in cellular therapy. I have contributed to HL7 FHIR working groups and support the development of the biologically derived product FHIR resource. So much of what I'll share today comes from my hands-on implementation experience enabling these sorts of integrations. I'm really quite excited about the data standard side and increasing the vocabulary of healthcare interoperability ecosystem to better support MPHO. So why do we think about ISBT 128 only as labeling? To me, it's clear that ISBT 128 is about interoperability and obviously patient safety and traceability, but this is not a universal understanding that it's about interoperability. And so while ISBT 128 has extensive label specifications, this is because of the many kinds of MPHOs that are supported and the constraints of a small physical label. But still, labeling is just one medium for the standard. Consider the kind of information on an ISBT 128 label and recognize that barcodes are already a form of electronic data exchange. It's also important to acknowledge that the coding tables and barcode data structures inherent to the standard establish that consistent meaning, regardless of where you are in the world or what kind of MPHO you're working with. And this consistency is really part of why ISBT 128 is such an accessible and comprehensive standard with a lower barrier to adoption. The real power of this standard, whether you're talking labels or barcodes, XML or FHIR, is the understanding that we're speaking with the same terminology, the same vocabulary. Consistent and repeatable data exchange reduces cost and eliminates the need for endless custom one-off solutions. More importantly, consistent and reliable traceability protects the patient. Picking up on some of the topics that Robin was speaking to, ultimately electronic systems thrive on discrete data, the smallest possible pieces of information that retain meaning. ISBT 128 barcodes contain data structures, but for messaging purposes, we usually want to break those down into discrete elements, like breaking a sentence down into individual words. This is where ST027, ISBT 128 Dictionary of Standard Data Elements really shines, as it outlines each of the data elements and how they are represented electronically. Take the donation identification number, data structure 1, as an example. In a barcode, it's a single data structure with a prefix of a equal sign. And this is telling the software scanning the barcode that they should treat the rest of the scan text as a DIN, which is important when you're talking about compound barcodes containing multiple data structures or just really giving context to an end software application. But in reality, this data structure is made up of multiple data elements, the DIN itself, and the flag characters that can further characterize the collection. This is also why we don't use the flag characters for the check calculations. This is something that we get asked all the time, actually. It's because the flag characters aren't actually a part of the sequence identification. And so there are many ISBT 128 data structures like this, and understanding this detail is really key for both effective labeling and building reusable, accurate integrations. Now let's dive into what this looks like in the electronic messaging world. Looking at XML. XML is one way to exchange ISBT 128 data in an electronic and highly adaptable manner. It is well understood, flexible, and well suited to custom integrations that have distinct needs. It does require a little bit more technical finesse to implement and requires you to build some foundational infrastructure. Still though, it's a really powerful tool. The ISBT 128 ST020 standard for XML messaging provides important information, including schemas for message validation, information on data elements such as element tags and uniform resource identifiers, URIs, as well as common examples for how all of the detailed information for a MPHO can be transmitted. off the label. When we're talking electronic exchange, we use a uniform resource locator or a unique object identifier, an OID, to identify what our data structure is. This is a little bit different than how the data structure is identified in the barcode string, but the concept is basically the same. In the example here, we have the XML representation of a donation identification number. And you can actually plug that URI into your web browser to see relevant information about the data element, including some descriptions of the content and text examples. And these URI endpoints are really much more powerful than the data identifiers you would encode in a barcode string because they help communicate semantic meaning to other parties. And in electronic data exchange, that semantic meaning is really the key piece that you need. Here's an example XML payload for whole blood product. You can see the full traceability through various identifiers, including the MPHO unique identifier, the donation identification number. We also have some detail on storage containers and some test results that have been performed on the product. This is everything you would have on a physical label and more. And this is one of the benefits of an XML message. It gives us completeness. It does also give us a bit of complexity. In practice, XML messages can capture everything you would see on a label and more. But there are challenges here. And the challenge is that XML requires the implementer to provide a lot of the infrastructure. You need to provide a message envelope. You need to handle authentication. You have security and privacy considerations and the need to design your own query and response models. This complexity can raise the barrier to adoption because you're spending a considerable amount of time and money building out that infrastructure. At the end of the day, XML is just a language syntax. We can still express ISBT 128 data elements through, but XML itself, aside from the MPHO product schema provided by the ISBT 128 standard, provides no actual infrastructure for healthcare interoperability. There's no orders, there's no observations, no patients. And so XML data exchange is still a really powerful tool and has traditionally been one of the underpinnings of internet-based data exchange. But you need to evaluate it against all options available in your technology ecosystem. Luckily, HL7 FHIR addresses many of the challenges seen with XML integrations. FHIR is a modern interoperability framework, and it provides much of the infrastructure that XML leaves out. It has options for authentication, for security, and more importantly, it has query patterns. It is widely adopted in healthcare and is designed for quick integration through web services using the same technology that powers the rest of the modern internet. For ISBT 128, FHIR uses resources like the biologically derived product and its profile for medical products of human origin, as well as additional resources like the biologically derived product dispense. All of this content lets us represent the same traceability data we saw earlier, but now inside a broader healthcare ecosystem that has patients, that has orders, deliveries, consignments, and more. FHIR enables comprehensive data exchange about MPHO, but also extends the availability of that information into other healthcare scenarios. Imagine ordering a stem cell collection and seeing every step tracked in one system, vein to vein. That's the power of FHIR, and something that historically has been very, very difficult to achieve. FHIR is a global standard, embraced across countries and vendors, and adoption continues to grow. There is a tremendous amount of infrastructure native to FHIR, and it brings us closer to a world where patients are empowered to access their own data, and that's a great future. Here on the screen here is the same information as in the previous XML example, now represented as a FHIR JSON object. With this model, the product data fits into the broader healthcare ecosystem, while authentication and security are already standardized and implementable by software developers that do not have specialized healthcare training. That allows you to build this infrastructure much more rapidly because the available pool of people that can do the work is much greater. This also means that the data science folks and the individuals that do have that healthcare specific interoperability expertise can leverage that knowledge on the real value add work of ensuring semantic meaning of data is augmented and maintained through the data lifecycle, rather than spending their time plumbing data from point A to point B. That's just a technical problem. It's easy to solve. The challenge is actually in the semantic meaning of data. With FHIR, we can model the entire MPHO lifecycle. For example, ordering a collection, tracking a stem cell infusion, maintaining traceability over time, from manufacturing all the way through to your EHR record for your patient. It also supports scenarios like product consignments, release authorization, and the recording of clinically relevant characteristics. In other words, FHIR scales to support all kinds of medical products of human origin. Here we have a brief example of the FHIR resources used to perform an MPHO collection using the biologically derived product resource, and then later tracking it to recipient infusion using the biologically derived product dispense. FHIR makes it possible for clinicians to track products across their entire life cycle using ISBT 128 terminology so patients stay safer. So why is FHIR important? FHIR supports a broad interoperable ecosystem beyond just products, connecting patients, providers, and vendors globally. It focuses on the patient, enabling apps, wearables, and better care coordination. It keeps things simple, leveraging web technologies to reduce integration costs. And it lays the foundation for the future, supporting genomics, AI, precision medicine, and advanced analytics. And these are only things that you can do with discrete data. This is a really exciting time in healthcare interoperability. And it's also really great to see ISBT 128 at the forefront. So a quick recap. ISBT 128 supports interoperability of all kinds and integrates well with other standards. Data exchange occurs through many different mediums, including physical labels, electronic barcodes, and electronic messaging. Electronic messaging works best with discrete data. And while XML provides a solid foundation, FHIR goes to the next level with a healthcare-specific, patient-centered, scalable, modern approach. If there's just one thing to take away, it's this. ISBT 128 isn't just a labeling standard. It's a language for safe, efficient healthcare data exchange for medical products of human origin. It is important to embrace standards and advocate for them, asking for these standards to be used with your partner organizations and your software vendors. This is something that we do at STEMsoft every day as a subspecialty software vendor. But we're just one voice, and your voice matters. If you'd like to discuss this further, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to talk about interoperability and real-world interoperability implementations. For now, though, thank you for your time. Let's go back to your hosts. Ryan, this is going to you.
Hey, everyone. Hopefully we get everybody on stage and we can go through some quick Q&A, answer everybody's questions that came through. Let's see here. Yeah, one of the first questions I received, I'm going to address this one for Karen. When will the labels with 2D codes be adopted and implemented for cell therapy products?
When things are adopted is truly up to the user community, right? There are several accrediting agencies that require or point to the use of ISBT 128 for cellular therapy. they are silent on linear barcode versus 2D data matrix, or even our inclusion of RFID on the labels, okay? So we need to take a look at ST004, which is the standards for cellular therapy labeling, the standard of care one. And you'll already see multiple examples of the 2D data matrix symbol in the example labels there, usually on the smaller labels. That does not preclude your use on the larger labels. As always, work with our help desk, work with your accrediting agency to make sure, work with the FDA if they need to approve your product label. But it's never too early to begin your implementation process there. Okay, and the implementation of these enhancements to the ISBT 128 standard are truly up to you. And it's like a snowball effect. The more people that adopt it and communicate that adoption to the people that they interact with, the easier it will all be for all of us. So I hope that helps.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Next one, Graham. Actually, I'll sign this one to you. Yeah. If the RFID reader does not read all the units in the container and in the first pass, and you run it through the reader again, how does it handle the rescanning the same units that were already captured in the first pass?
Okay. All RFID labels have a unique ID. It's literally called the UID. It's typically it is a 64-bit number, so it's an extremely large and unique number. So that allows the reader to clearly identify the tags that it is reading and the tags it has read. So it's a very straightforward system. It sort of happens in the background of any read. Yeah.
Robin, I think, is it acceptable for a label to have a mix of linear barcodes and 2D data matrix symbols? For example, if we received a label with a product code and a 2D symbology, and all information is also in the linear barcode format.
Okay, so it is acceptable to have a mix, but the 2D data matrix symbol must encode certain elements. I believe we're talking about cellular therapy here. It's ST004 defines what elements must be encoded in that 2D barcode if a 2D barcode is used. In addition to that, section 2.3.2 of the implementation guide, IG014, use of data matrix symbols, provides information on how multiple data structures can be appropriately included within that 2D data matrix symbol.
Got it. Graham, I just had another question come through. Thank you so much, Robin. Graham, I just had another question come through. Is it possible to use RFID cryopreservation where the tags are -20 cryo containers?
Sorry, -20 or minus?
Sorry, I meant rather -200 cryo containers.
-200. Okay. Okay, that is a challenge, and there's a couple of reasons it's a big challenge, because the silicon that's normally used to make RFID chips becomes degenerate at -150 degrees centigrade, which means the silicon is doped with N and P type impurities to give it the electrical characteristics, but at those very low temperatures, there's not enough energy to allow carriers to be spontaneously generated, and so that the silicon becomes basically non-functional. So you can design silicon with you use high implant levels in order to reduce the energy required for free carriers or minority carriers to be generated. But it's a very specialized case. So in general, no. What there are some RFID systems that do not rely on silicon. They use, say, mechanical resonances. So you can get some systems which have micro machined resonant arms that will resonate at a selection of frequencies. So they can have a fixed. You scan with you scan across a band of frequencies, and these little micro cantilevers have been set up to resonate in a particular pattern, and so you can create you can have a small 8 or 9-bit serial number, but it certainly is not and very short range as well. So it's really a challenge. Also, on the other side, the readers, in the same way that silicon can't really operate it down at those temperatures. The reader electronics can't either. So you can't put the electronics in that environment. You can put the antenna in the environment, but even the components on the antenna are not rated for usually anything below minus 55. So it's a really difficult problem. There are companies that do provide some RFID, but it's very short range, and you've got some serious technical challenges making it happen. So yeah, it is a great challenge technically to do that. Actually, I can add a little bit more. Down at minus 80 for ultra low temperature is possible. That can be done and is done. And now there are RFID systems available with full functionality at minus 90. So they're quite capable of being program written while the device, when the item is chilled down to minus low temperatures. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. Question for, well, let me just move this over. For David. David, how does XML integration with ISBT 128 support interoperability?
So interoperability is easier with a standard vocabulary, and that's what ISBT 128 provides. You can really think of interoperability as a combination of communication mechanisms and then understanding of the data that's being communicated. That is ultimately one of the biggest challenges to interoperability in the first place, is not only having the communication mechanism, but a common frame of reference for what that data is. What I'm seeing certainly is, excellent. We have ISBT terminology. We have XML FHIR. We have all the pieces needed to do interoperability, but you still need to have discrete data. You need to have software that can move all of these pieces. And even for something like FHIR, and even for a standard like ISBT 128 that is well supported within FHIR, there's still barriers to adoption, because getting vendor buy-in, getting community buy-in is a big challenge. So, like at the end of the day, when we want to do electronic data exchange, everything that we have to negotiate or innovate or do in a one-off basis costs time and money. And standards let us reuse that technology, and they make it easier to focus on the real problem. It comes down to getting that community buy-in and making sure you actually have the data necessary to support the problem you're trying to solve.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. I know we're getting close to the end here. I just wanted to this little note to add. If you are creating labels and you're using the 2D data matrix and you want to get your labels verified, or just want to be looked at to ensure that they're consistent with the ISBT 128 standard, please send them in. We are happy. We have a technical team here, myself, other members, be happy to review these labels against the standard and to verify its accuracies and present any findings that we have to you. We'll jump on a call with you. We'll go through the explanations and provide you essential documents with those explanations. So it kind of helps make sense of it all. But just wanted to add that little note.
Okay. So I wanted to thank you all for joining us today. Working in the arena of medical products of human origin, we all utilize change control processes within our facilities. These are significant changes that we're talking about. And so I encourage you to begin your planning, communicate, all that negotiation that David's talking about, and making sure that you connect with those others that are in your ecosystem. We've talked about a lot today. I am a particular champion of the 2D symbology. As Robin stated, it allows you to encode red cell antigens with their test history. This is different and more expanded than the linear barcode that just lets you say whether it's positive or negative. You could also use XML or FHIR to be able to get that more detailed information. We hope that this webinar has gotten you thinking about how your facility encodes ISBT 128 information, the importance of doing this in a very standard manner. And we are sorry that we did not get to all of your questions. We will be sending a Q&A summary to all the participants, and we'll answer any questions submitted that we did not have time to answer. Thank you to all of our speakers. I would name them, but we are at the top of the hour. And so thank you to Beatriz Perez and Kayla Perez, working hard behind the scenes to help make this work and putting it together from the beginning. Ryan already mentioned the help desk, and ICCBA will be at both AATB in Atlanta and AABB in San Diego next month. We hope to see some of you there. Thank you for joining us today.